Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for today's planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the Planning Department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, please take the roll.
I'll remind everybody they're muted, so they'll need to unmute to answer. But Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Mr. Dean? Mr. Freed?
Here.
Ms. Herron?
Here.
Mr. Kanar?
Here.
Mr. Kalp?
Here.
Ms. Messina?
Here.
Ms. Ringler?
Here.
And Mr. Warner.
Here.
We have 9 and a quorum.
Item B, approval of minutes, February 15th, 2021.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes. This is Corey Dean.
Chair, this is Wiley Kanar. I would second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion, commissioners? Hearing none, please, Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kanar?
Aye.
Mr. Kalp?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
Ms. Ringler?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0.
Item C on the agenda, declaration of conflict of interest, ex parte communications by members of the commission or staff. All right, hearing none, we will move forward. Item D, action items. D1, public hearing of CPA 21/02 Downtown Master Plan by the City of Topeka, requesting to amend the text and map of the City of Topeka's comprehensive plan, creating the Downtown Topeka Master Plan. The area affected by the amendment is bounded by Topeka Boulevard to the west, Moore Street to the north, BNSF rail lines to the east, and 13th Street to the south. Mr. Warner.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Finder is going to handle this one.
Thanks,
Mr.
Dan.
Finder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll get us started tonight, and Dan can join in as questions are needed. There were some changes since the last time we presented to you last month. Nothing of huge substance, but we put those in your memo, cover memo to this item in your packet. And if there's any questions about those, we certainly can answer those. Tonight, since we are having a public hearing, what I thought we would do, and what we normally do with these plans, is we do the full presentation except for the implementation the month before. So I will focus a little more on the implementation part, which is part 3 of the plan. You did not have that in your draft last month. But since it's a public hearing, I'll also try and briefly give an overview of the districts in the plan and sort of the background for the plan. So we kind of can tie up and tie it all together. If that's okay, I'll start here by sharing screen. It should help. Okay, I think everybody can see that now. Unless you can't. So as we presented last month, and as we've been presenting to you over the last, oh gosh, this has been going on a year now, we are at that point of recommending to you adoption or recommending adoption to the governing body of this downtown master plan element of the comprehensive plan. It is, as you'll see, a series and collection of visions and strategies to really guide the next 10 years of downtown. We call the current phase that we're in, or the last 10 years, more or less, last 5 years, sort of the current generation. Many of you know we've had some unprecedented improvements, particularly on Kansas Avenue between 6th and 10th in the last 5 years. So that current generation really had its root in planning work 10 plus years ago. And so that's why we really want to focus on planning for the next generation with this master plan. We have a 20-year outdated plan, actually, that much of the current generation are implemented. So we want to ask, what does that next generation of downtown development look like? We've got a lot of different good, but different actions and studies and plans that are in place over the last 15 or so years. But we want to try and get in the same boat and align that vision and have a common vision moving forward. So the plan itself is really a guide for physical development and land use. It is market-based. The foundation of it is a market study that was done in 2019. So our land use is market-based, aspirational beyond the next 10 years of some things that could be. And as I said, we broke down the area into different districts, 9 districts, and we trying to align those plans within a plan. The big objectives, the foundational objectives for downtown in this plan would be to be welcoming, to be activated, resilient, and connected. If we can do that, then we can get to that improvement and enhancement of quality of life in place for downtown. And why is that so important? With that, downtown is a regional asset. It is a economic, probably our biggest economic asset that we have to attract talent and jobs. And if we do that, we will have tremendous return on investment. This shows the value per acre within the city. Those spikes in the middle on the left-hand side there, that's downtown. So it's a small footprint, it's dense. You don't have to put in a huge amount of infrastructure. It's already there. So you're talking about mostly rehabbing and maintaining what you have. And if you do that right and you do it strategically, you're going to take advantage of a lot of great trends that are happening nationwide as well as in the Midwest for downtowns. As I mentioned, we have a market study that is the foundation of our land use recommendations that looked at what were the people and the products that were most in demand for downtown. Its conclusions were that we could support another 900 housing units, at least 690,000 square foot of supportable retail, office, another 300,000 square feet of Class A newer or rehab space, and another at least 200 hotel rooms. One of the issues, big issues, with that demand is we really don't have enough development opportunity to reinvent all areas of downtown that need reinvestment today. We are just, and if you look at this map, as I've shown in the past, we are a fairly big downtown. We're about 7 times the size of Lawrence downtown, which you can see in red there, and our footprints in green. So we don't have enough demand to fill up every square inch and block of that boundary, but we do have a high enough level of demand that we can be strategic and intentional, so that where we go with our public investment can begin to have a ripple effect without undermining other areas of the downtown. And that leads us to kind of the framework for downtown by breaking it into 9 different districts. So each one of these districts has its own brand, has its own function. And that is really important. That's really important so that they are complementary to each other. They don't end up competing. And that is primarily because we don't have unlimited demand, at least for the next 10 years. We also want to reinforce that spine of downtown, which is Kansas Avenue, which is those red dots connecting north and south of the river, with walkable segments, and those stars along the way are those catalytic developments. Those we call them activity hubs, but those are the things that attract people from outside downtown to downtown. And if we can get them to those areas, then you can begin to really connect and have them extend their stay and have different reasons for staying here, whether it's 8 to 5 or beyond 5 or during the weekends. So kind of diversifying those catalysts are really important. So I'm going to go through and just give a real high level overview of each district and its brand. I'm not going to spend a lot of time delving into it, but I'll try to point out the 1 or 2 unique things about that district. Each one of these district overviews has a brand and some pictures on the left side. We have some built out 3D development scenarios on the right hand side, and then above that you see these circles that actually begins to track the demand. We want to find a home for those 900 new housing units and those 200 plus hotel rooms, etc. So where are those going, district to district? We'll start out with the tower, named for the water tower. This is there's kind of 2 visions here, as an urban village, or as a area for a larger sports complex, sports pavilion or field house, as we have come to call it, which would bring a very unique offering to a downtown setting that checks a lot of boxes. So as we move forward, you can kind of see it at that laid out on a little bigger footprint there. We don't have a lot of blocks that could handle such a unique space. And this didn't come across as well earlier, I think, in some of our messaging, but it's not meant for a professional sports of any sort. It's a youth sport orientation, and the courts and indoor field space for tournaments and certainly local teams and practices. There is a dearth of space. It just seems to continue to grow, that demand. And it's one of those things that is fairly economically resilient. In studying this a little more from community to community, it's one of the last things people are going to cut out of their wallet is spending on youth sports. Okay, keep moving. Historic Kansas Avenue, that is to the north of the Tower District. Again, this is our traditional historic District, our mixed use centerpiece, if you will. This is our destination place to be. And this is where you'll see the majority of the retail and dining options, entertainment, and you'll see some office to residential conversions, not on a huge scale, but certainly on a good scale over the next 10 years. Part of this district that we see some opportunity in is Quincy Street, with a bit of a makeover between 6th and 10th. The city has some street projects lined up, and at that time we would recommend that we look at going, for instance, from 5 to 3 lanes, dressing it up, softening it up, particularly with the parking garage facades, and adding a gateway effect on 8th Street. Office and catalysts going further to the north. There's 2 very prominent catalytic developments here. One is the potential for a convention center hotel, which was shown to be in need, in demand, if you will, in our market studies. And again, we're looking at the 4th and Kansas area for something of that size and scale, and provide that activity hub that we showed on the earlier. We also would say that the post office renovations and for mixed use development is also potentially catalytic as well. So we see continuation of office, Class A office upgrades, as well as some conversions of office to residential. We continue further north, and that office catalyst district really kind of bridges the gap between the historic district and north of the river, gets us down to the river and then across the river. Noto will continue to be that eclectic arts district with that Main Street pedestrian feel. Hope to see more living as well as working opportunities in the area for artists as well as others. And so, and then increasingly see the riverfront activated for park, walking and bike trails, events, art, music, etc. Another connection that we're very much support of in the plan is, again, increasing that multimodal connection between River North and River South. And in fact, we already have received a grant from KDOT to convert one of those vehicle lanes to a separated two-way bike lane. So we're working on plans for that right now, and that was really neat to see that we've already started to implement that idea. Jumping back across the river back towards where the Capitol is, we go into what is known as the Capitol District. Again, this is the district, or the focus here is really the government green space around there with the renovation of the docking building and reuse for the state, hopefully to bring back and relocate KDHE labs up to docking is our ultimate hope. And then also infilling some of the parking areas for future construction to get those back on the tax rolls. This is a rendering of looking south from 7th and Van Buren of what could be with some of the infill development on the parking lots along Van Buren, which we will look at next. So as you go north from the Capitol, you get into the Van Buren district north of 7th. This is what we would see as Topeka, or downtown's new residential construction area, kind of their new neighborhood, if you will. You'll note that Kansas Avenue, a lot of existing buildings, the historic district, so you'll see more renovations and reuse of buildings in that district. But once you get off of the Kansas Avenue corridor, and you see on Van Buren, a little bit on Jackson as well, that there's really a lot of opportunity here to have a completely new feel kind of a new residential construction neighborhood for younger professionals, maybe a grocery store anchor, which we've envisioned here. So you could get a sense of what we're talking about looking north from 7th and Van Buren. Again, filling in that corridor with really a new residential neighborhood and mixed use at the ground level. There will be a need for some structured parking, either new or to use some that is existing. This takes us to the River South area as we go north, and this is where we would envision an innovation district. River South is really interesting because it's where a lot of the corridors and the districts kind of all converge, and they converge at the river. And we just happen to have hopefully a new I-70 Paul Quincy Viaduct project that will really reshape that area in the next 10 years, maybe even next 5 to 10 years. But you don't want to compete with what's going on necessarily in Noto or downtown or in Kansas Avenue District, Office and Catalyst. So what you're looking at is maybe more of an eclectic feel here, where you're keeping and preserving some of those older buildings. This is a bit of a little bit of a forgotten area, but if you go down there, you'll see the opportunities in the buildings people have started to find. But we do need to look at reclaiming some of that riverfront for the public, and turning that back, not just for the public, but also for new development opportunities. We kind of envision some R&D, maybe outgrowth of plug and play, where we have some entrepreneurs in the animal health sciences that want to grow in Topeka. We think this would be a great landing spot for them. Okay. These are just some renderings from the district looking back south on Van Buren. You can kind of see underneath the new Paul Quincy, kind of that effect. You have a whole new feel. This is just a bird's eye view of what could be. And the overlook at the levee, so that you have sort of a public / private space without having necessarily a dedicated park space, but to get people back on the river. And the River to Rail District is, again, our traditional industrial district with railroad routes and larger scale industry. Not a lot of changes here. You need this type of area in our downtown, and so we see a continuation of that. It will be impacted by some of the Paul Quincy changes, but we hope to maintain very good circulation to and from it. The last district, Civic District, as we work our way back to where we started, kind of. This would be the area where the jail and City Hall and the county courthouse and TMTA's Quincy Street Station is located. And we do have some opportunities to maybe relocate some of those public uses that are either on the riverfront or along Kansas Avenue to open up those areas for higher and better and catalytic uses. This would be an ideal and reasonable expectation to bring them over here. One such idea, such as the Justice Center or Topeka Metro facility, we have in the plan as visions, and then we also have a vision for a kind of a reimagined corridor with a Topeka flag adorning one of our parking garage facades. So we included history for every district, which is really neat. Thanks to Tim Paris of our staff putting that together. We also outline what changes need to be made to zoning to have more of a mixed use zoning for downtown, more flexibility for development. Each district has its own circulation and street recommendations, trying to emphasize, again, walkability and mobility. And that brings us to our part 3, which is implementation. And since we last met you, we compiled some of the results from the community survey, which went out in January through February. And we had, I think, 178 responses. The top 5 priorities. So really what we did is we put forth, I think there's 11 kind of bigger ideas that we called together into the survey and said, what of these would you recommend is a top priority for downtown? We also asked if there were others ideas that you would recommend as a priority. The results were interesting. We had a tie at the top with Riverfront Access and dining, cafe, food, beverage, all tying for 62% of all respondents mentioned those as a top 5 priority. Next, we had entertainment venues. Almost half of the respondents mentioned that in the top 5, followed by retail storefronts and a grocery store anchor. Okay, some of the kind of the takeaways from the survey and the feedback we got once we released the plan for public comment in the last 45 to 60 days. That would include that, we really think moving forward, housing is going to be that bellwether for the success of downtown. We've done so many things, and I keep using the we. It's a collective we, a community we. A lot of the property owners, as well as the public and private investment, has really taken downtown to another level. And so we think housing, whether there's a quality of life that goes round the clock downtown, we have so much demand for people to live downtown, to create those opportunities on a larger scale. Will definitely tell if we are moving in the right direction. Housing really checks a lot of boxes as you think about it for mixed use and diversity, and supporting more service and retail, et cetera, downtown. Riverfront access is a priority. That was kind of the second biggest takeaway, or probably the biggest takeaway from the survey itself. That really jumped up there and was tied for the top honor. And it fits really nicely with the plan's emphasis on diverse quality of life offerings. So there was a little bit of a surprise, but you don't have to do that, or you don't have to wait for development to do that. And so I think that's some of the things we're recommending can move that forward and get people down there sooner rather than later. Third, again, dining, entertainment, retail, those are separate things, but those were all experiences that were high priorities for folks who do not frequent downtown as much. So if you think about it, that could be very telling for those who don't come down as much, what would bring them downtown. So that's what they thought of when they thought of downtown. And those would be great, because particularly with entertainment and dining, you're talking about mostly, those could really support the evenings and weekends. Fourth, grocery store and aesthetic makeovers were actually the highest priorities of those folks who were downtown, which is interesting. So grocery store, a very logical service need for those who spend a lot of their times downtown, as well as how it looks and the appeal and attractiveness of downtown makes a lot of sense when you think about it for those people who are down there the most. Fifth, so some of those big catalytic projects that we had in the plan and showed, whether it's the convention center, the sports pavilion, the Justice Center, those sort of things, those did not show as high of a, I guess I'd call it a need. You have wants and needs. I think we all would say we would want those sort of things, but it may be more telling that we haven't done enough or had enough conversation or done enough education as to how the need is actually highly valued for each one of those. And so I think there's a need to, again, continue community conversation on those. The needs are pretty well documented, but are they feasible? Are they something that can be afforded without a huge public investment? And then lastly, downtown is everybody's neighborhood. We had a lot of comments, particularly early when we released the plan about inclusion and what this plan represents. So we absolutely, as you saw, one of the fundamental objectives was to be more resilient and be more diverse. We have to embrace that diversity and inclusion for downtown, so we can really become the best version of ourselves for all Topekans. So that was very important. We will not have a successful downtown without that, and it stands to reason. Diversity and resiliency actually will support downtown through hard times and lean times, and will just make us more vibrant day to day. So those were the takeaways. The rest of the implementation, or part 3, looked at where the housing would be taking place. As I said earlier, we were kind of measuring that along the way. Most of the new housing units will be in the Van Buren and historic Kansas Avenue districts. The hotels, we think, would be planned mostly for the office and Catalyst district. The office Class A conversions in the office and Catalyst district, there's some going on there right now, as well as potentially that River South area. We could see that taking off later in that 10-year area. Oops, I forgot to. Oh, and retail, again, retail would be mostly concentrated, as it is now, in historic Kansas Avenue and the Noto River North districts. We listed a number of roadway projects by district. We pulled them all together in part 3 to kind of put them in 3 different buckets. I think I'm showing 2 of the buckets here, but so on one hand, you have independent projects there on the left, which really are not dependent on development. There's a need to improve and upgrade those right now without without them being based on a particular development. And then on the right-hand side, you have Quincy and other development dependent projects. Those again are more dependent on if Quincy happens, if other development comes forth, that we should be prepared to upgrade some of those street segments in the downtown. And then there's a third bucket, which I think are just other needs that would be of maybe a lower priority, that they float as well. And we're very well aware conditions can change. Just look at last year. The markets can change. What particular land uses, the values of those and need for those can change. So we just have to be cognizant of that and be ready with a plan, but also be ready to pivot as needed. And then I think this is, oh no, one more thing. So downtown zoning changes, you see a lot of purple there. That represents the D districts, which D1, D2, and D3, those are all mixed use districts. For the most part, we have about, I'd say 25% to maybe 30% of downtown south of the river is designated that zoning right now. So you can see we are moving towards a much more flexible mixed use area for all of downtown. I'd say about 80% of the area south of the river. The north of the river is already has its own mixed use, a little lower scale mixed use, but those are the X districts that are already in place. So we will come back to you with those zoning changes. This plan does not make any zoning changes. It would set policy for land use that, if adopted, then we would it would allow us to come back to you here later this year with those zoning changes. Lastly, we have design standards that have been upgraded to include residential new construction, as well as just have a little more little more comprehension on and guidance than what we have now. Our current design standards in the D districts are they're good. They're a little light. So this just puts a little more meat and substance to those for better guidance and clarification. And those were developed by a committee made up of design professionals that Dan Warner worked with in the last year. If you don't see it before you see it, you will never see it. And we believe this wholeheartedly. We want to make sure we get some visuals and get a big picture for the visions that can take place here, because we think there's a believable vision here. We want to make sure it's practical and feasible. A little more work on some of those things to do, but again, we wanted this plan to be kind of that vision to see, because we think there's a better chance that we will see it in reality. Okay, with that, I will stop. I don't know if there's any questions on any other substantive or minor changes that we've made to the plan. Dan can handle any of those, but for now, I'll just stand for any comments or questions you have of staff, and before you open it up to the public.
Yeah, Bill, I'll just start. I really appreciate the implementation section that was added that we hadn't seen that you presented tonight. I really like the roadway projects being separated out and kind of prioritized as to which impact to downtown might cause them to be a priority or not. And then I really liked the need evaluation for some of the catalyst projects. I know we have a lot going on in the plan, and we're going to have to focus on what areas we can and can't affect, and that need evaluation I think will be really important as we have opportunities to relocate or add potential larger catalysts to those areas. So appreciate all the hard work you and Mr. Warner. Good stuff.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I promised myself I wouldn't forget again, and I did. As you were mentioning staff, I want to thank Bryson Risley, the unsung hero here that put almost all of what you saw together in terms of the 3D mapping and the pictures and the staff created illustrations. We also had some consultant help with some of those other a little more higher level illustrations from Architect One and our consultant Stan Tech with the River South. So before I forget, I just wanted to thank them. And I think I mentioned Tim Paris as well. So yeah, thank you for letting me do that.
Sure. Yeah, I see Tim on and Bryson on the call this evening as well. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Finder and staff?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Freed.
No questions. I appreciate the presentation. And again, like Commissioner Armstrong said, having the implementation schedule was nice. The more I think about this and look at it, I really do appreciate the various sectors. I've been involved in development in other communities in the past. And in a community like this, it's smaller to have people competing and doing their own little bits and pieces wherever, and not having organized could really waste, for lack of a better word, the full value of the development dollars that we're trying to do to develop a good community. And so I do appreciate the thoughtfulness in those kinds of areas. Obviously, some people may not like having it restricted to certain areas, whatever they may want, but it really, to me, I think that really aids in having a good development with the limited dollars that we may have to get a good value for the community.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
This was
I definitely agree with Mr. Freed. I'm really excited about this master plan and just the level of detail that's involved on it. I do have a question. I think it's just clarifying. I'm not really sure on the parking aspect of it. So I saw on page 411 how it mentions parking for the historic downtown area. That's my main concern for parking. I'm just curious. So it says on there that you're recommending angled on-street parking, but we may have to add parallel parking because of considerations for bike or pedestrian may dictate for it. So in this master plan, it's not so much outlining what the parking should be, or if we're going to charge or not charge. It's just like, it's really just showing what it could be, right?
Yeah, Commissioner Messina, there is a parking plan study that is the city already has that they're working with downtown stakeholders to implement, and actually there'll be some harder recommendations coming forth. I think we got interrupted here by the pandemic last year, so I would suspect those more granular type details and recommendations will come forth with that from city staff. But in general, what you'll see in this plan is kind of support for a couple parking ideas, which is one, yes, turning some of our oversized streets to either from 5 lanes to 3 lanes with some bike accommodations and some angled parking accommodations, or parallel. Those have yet to be. Yeah, those are going to be design details, but either way, we want to make it more walkable and more mobile for non-vehicle users. And the other big parking idea was to try, and there is a need for, how should I say, more walkable parking, so that there is a concern that there might, so we don't have a tremendous charge for users. We're everywhere that we would kind of stair step that, so you have a little, freer parking if you want to walk a little more, and then we'd love to see those parking garages softened up as well, and we think they can really be an opportunity there. So those are the main parking recommendations here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments, commissioners? All right, hearing none, I will open the public hearing. We've got a lot of people on tonight, so if you have your video on and raise your hand, I'll try to call on you. We ask each person to limit their comments to 4 minutes. We do have a timer, and we'll try to keep it to that this evening. And at the end of your comments, Commission will have the opportunity to ask any questions. Anyone on this evening for the public hearing for the downtown master plan? Rhiannon.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rhiannon Friedman, and I took over for Vince Fry as the role of President of Downtown Topeka, Inc. At the end of December of last year. So for those of you I haven't met yet, it's a pleasure to meet you and glad I got to sit in on this. I really just wanted to join and provide a statement of support. In starting this new role, it became instantly clear to me the amount of work and research and collaboration that went into this downtown master plan. And coming from a background of economic development, when it comes to securing, outside development dollars, new development opportunities, even redevelopment, it's critical to have plans like these to help show that the community is in sync and in line and has local support backing it. So I'm thankful that I get to come into a position where, downtown's experienced 2 years of this great momentum. And now we have this amazing plan to help even drive it forward to the next step. So I'm grateful and thankful for the work that was laid out. And just have to say a big shout out to Bill and Dan and their team, and lucky to get to work with all these people. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rhiannon. Anyone else on this evening to speak to I see Mr. Glenn's hand, and then Mr. Bell, you'll be next.
Hi, I'm Grant Glenn. I'm a lawyer in town for over 40 years. I have been actively involved in the Downtown Rotary Club, as well as Friends of the Free State Capitol, which has been rehabbing Constitution Hall. So we have a real strong investment in the 400 block of Kansas. The Rotary Club built the Freedom Park there to commemorate the events of Constitution Hall and those of the post office building, the federal courthouse that was located there. The Constitution Hall will be getting a new face, new facade this year. And there is money being raised and plans being made for redevelopment of the inside of the building that will include education and community meeting space, and perhaps some retail space that might include a restaurant. And that all should be done and available to the public in the next 2-year frame. We're exceedingly excited about the Catalast opportunity. Across the street is the post office, which is not on the rolls for yet for the National Register, but is provided that the post office ever sells it. There is a provision that it must be listed at that time, and it is eligible for National Register for its national importance, as is Constitution Hall. So these are two of the only buildings in Topeka, two of the few buildings in Topeka that are on the National Register or will be for their national importance. And as a catalyst, this post office is a diminishing dinosaur that is elegant in potential and a huge potential catalyst for downtown development, and is really low-hanging fruit. Yet we have let the most difficult and backward bureaucracy in the free world stand in the way of redevelopment of this treasure. We need to, as a community, find a way to get the post office out of there and get this on the tax rolls and redevelop for public use. That is a as all the potential projects outlined in this plan, it is among the easiest to accomplish with the greatest return for making the 4th and 5th block of Kansas Avenue alive again. And we urge the council, the planning commission and the city council to do everything in their power to push the post office using our federal representatives to make a decision and get on with that so that we can all prosper for a redeveloped downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. And Mr. Bell, you're next.
Yes, thank you for giving me a chance to speak before the body. And I like the plan. I was able to see Dan's presentation on Sunday when he presented before the Shawnee County Historic society, and it is an exciting plan, and it looks like it's something that is finally going to provide some direction for downtown redevelopment. I've been involved since March of 2018 with the Central Topeka Grocery Oasis. And so when I saw the grocery store element that's included in the Van Buren District, that really piqued my interest. Of course, those of you who may know, the Dillons closed in February of 2016 out in Central Topeka at Huntoon and Lane Streets. And so we've been working since then to get another full service grocery store there. And so I guess in one respect, it's encouraging that the city, although quite frankly, has been lukewarm to our efforts, in Central Topeka seems to be warming up to the idea of a downtown grocery store. And so hopefully we'll be able then to use that enthusiasm other places, as 60% of Topeka now is a food desert. And I know that those probably are more tangential issues to what you're talking about tonight. But again, with a grocery store being included in the plan, I guess in that respect, they are related. I'm old enough to remember that there used to be a grocery store, I believe near 6th and Harrison. I think it was an A&P back in the day. And of course, we had that simultaneously when we had Dibbles over at Huntoon and Lane in Central Topeka. So obviously having the two together in fairly close proximity is something that can be done. The question I had was regarding the reduction of the proposed reduction in traffic lanes. Jackson and some other streets immediately come to mind, Quincy. And I guess I'm wondering how that's going to work with potentially an increased traffic flow as you attract more people to downtown. So obviously there's a way that that can work. I'm just not seeing it. And I guess the question would be, how do you reconcile those two things?
Mr. Viander or anyone from staff want to address that?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Hi, Mike.
Hey.
Hey. Yeah, excellent stuff as usual. In terms of this what we call lane reallocations, that is something that, if you think about it, so we looked at it from a traffic circulation standpoint, and a lot of those 5-laners and the 3-lane one-way streets are just completely overbuilt for any area, but even downtown where we have an influx of people that come in all at once. And that's the history of that. That's really what we were much more car centric of getting people in, commuters in, and getting commuters out. And we're trying to move, and so number one, we're trying to move towards a multimodal network that is strong and doesn't have to be overbuilt in one area or the other, and it can support transit, peds, bikes, as well as vehicles. And we think we can have a more balanced network that way with by looking at some of those lane reallocations and not undermine getting people circulated throughout downtown. We have some key arterials. 6 comes to mind that connects our east and west, for instance. We have obviously we did what we did, and then on Kansas Avenue, one of our key connector north and south, we did 6th to 10th. We reallocated that. So we're still, we're getting used to this. The community's getting used to this idea, but it's working, and it's gone over well. It has made it more walkable. Topeka Boulevard, obviously, we're not going to mess with that. That's a main thoroughfare that moves major traffic north and south. So, from what we have studied, we definitely can handle that. We did some of those studies when we were looking to apply for some bikeway facilities on 8th and 10th and 6th and Kansas, and so we did come back with a positive. Yes, we could handle with a fewer some fewer lanes there. And I'll just, you probably didn't ask, but I'm gonna jump in on the grocery store thing, because we really think any grocery store that has the ability to support more of this of central Topeka, which downtown is part of. And don't forget, east and north are adjacent, that really needs that as well. So if it's downtown, if it's somewhere, it's the need is there, and we're definitely in support of finding something that can check multiple boxes, if you will, to serve the food desert. So,
Thanks, Bill. Mr. Bell, I show you have a minute left to conclude if you have any final comments.
No, I'm good. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, sir. Any others wishing to speak to the downtown master plan this evening? I can't see everyone's square, and a lot aren't on video. I don't see anyone's hands up.
Someone else does appear to have their hand up, Mr. Chair. I think it's Mr. Massalamas.
I see Matt and Brian. Were one of you hoping to speak to this item? You can unmute and.
Yes, I would like to.
All right. Matt, go ahead.
I'm Matt Massalonis. I would just strongly encourage staff to kind of look at a bigger scale. Topeka is meant to be the governmental center of the state. It's the transit. It's where everyone should be coming. I think I would encourage a grander thought of how people come and where would they enter the city, as well as I would encourage them also to be thinking about the governmental housing. Like, people come from all over the counties, from all over the state to stay here during sessions, and it sure be great to have a governmental housing center. And so if anything, think bigger, and then I'd even think bigger than that. What is the big statement nationally to where Kansas cannot be seen just as a flyover state, but as a reason to be here? So just add some sparkle in there. This is your time to kind of add those elements to the master plan, which would be really encouraging for a long range plan, not just for the city itself, but for the state and the United States in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Any others this evening? All right. With that, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, any discussion before we take an action to send this to the governing body?
Chairman.
Mr. Kaup.
As others have done, I just wanted to congratulate Bill and Dan and Bryson for the hard work. It's a good product and much needed, and it'll be a challenge to implement it. But it's important to get something out there and have it approved and adopted. So thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to recommend approval. I would make a motion to recommend approval to the governing body to adopt this as an element of the city's comprehensive plan.
Sure, I second. This is Corey.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Chris, will you please take the roll?
Yes, we'll go in reverse order. Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Ringler?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
Mr. Kaup?
Aye.
Mr. Canar,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
and Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0 with none abstaining.
Moving on to item D2, action item, public hearing Z21/03 by North Topeka Storage, requesting to amend the district zoning map from PUD M1A limited multifamily dwelling district uses to I1 light industrial district on 3 parcels of land located on the south side of Northwest Broad Street, 250 feet west of Northwest Topeka Boulevard, to allow for construction and operation of a self-storage facility. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Z2103 is a proposal by North Topeka Storage to change the zoning of this 6-acre site from PUD plan unit development with M1A limited multiple family dwelling district uses to I1 light industrial district. Next slide, please. The property is located in North Topeka West neighborhood on the south side of Broad Street and west of Topeka Boulevard. The proposed zoning change will allow the owner to construct and operate a self-storage facility. At this time, there appears to be no opposition from neighbors or the general public to the proposed zoning change. Staff is recommending approval and recommends the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the governing body. Next slide, please. The balance of the block is currently zoned C4 Commercial District and abuts the property on the east and northwest. Also surrounding the subject property is I1 light industrial zoning on the north, south, and southwest. And there's a small section of R1 single family dwelling district zoning abutting the subject property to the northwest. Next slide, please. This slide shows how the site has evolved over time. At one time, it was actually a mobile home park. Next slide, please. The proposed zoning and land use are consistent with the comprehensive plan. The future land use map in the North Topeka West Neighborhood Plan, which is a part of the comprehensive plan, designates this block and the surrounding blocks as commercial uses. Regarding the other golden factors, the proposed development fits the surrounding neighborhood's physical character, and the proposed I1 zoning is compatible with surrounding zoning. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, staff is recommending approval, and this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Commissioners, questions for staff? All right, hearing none, we will call for a presentation or comments by the applicant, followed by questions from the commission. I see Mr. Holland with Cook, Flat, and Strobel Engineers with us this evening. Mr. Holland, are you representing the owner tonight?
Yes, sir. Am I getting feedback?
Yes, sir.
All right, how about now?
That's good.
Kevin Holland, Cook, Flat, and Strobel. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Mike said, we have an owner looking to come in and put some self-storage in here. He also owns the building along Topeka Boulevard, the strip mall to the east there as well. So fortunately, you have congruent ownership once we move on and go forward with this. But I'm here for any questions.
So this would be basically behind his strip mall on Topeka Boulevard that he owns as well?
Doesn't sound like any questions are out there, but if there are any, I can answer. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I did have one. So you did say that he owns the property adjacent to this on Topeka Boulevard. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. I had two up. What, can you repeat that question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, I was just looking back at the map. So you said he does own the strip mall on Topeka Boulevard, and this is directly behind it?
Directly to the east, correct.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? All right, with that, we will go ahead and open the public hearing. Again, anyone wishing to speak, I'll ask you to raise your hand on video and ask you to limit your comments to 4 minutes. We will be trying to keep it to that this evening. Anyone wishing to speak to this that's here this evening? All right, I don't see anyone. So with that, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with staff's recommendation and would recommend a motion for approval.
Mark Freed will second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? I also agree, this being adjacent to their own property and surrounding the other commercial zoned areas, it makes sense to me. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, Chris, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Armstrong,
Aye.
Mr. Dean,
I think he had to jump off at 7.
okay, gotcha. Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Kanar,
Aye.
Mr. Kelp,
Aye.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
Ms. Ringler,
Aye.
and Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0 with none abstaining.
All right, thank you. Moving on to action item D3, public hearing of Z21/01 by 900 Fairlawn Associates LLC, requesting to amend the district map on property located at 902 Southwest Fairlawn from office O&I 1 office and industrial and institutional to C2 commercial district to allow a restaurant with drive-through service. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. As with the previous item, I'm presenting this, but actually a lot of the behind the scenes work was done by our planner, Melissa Fahrenbrook. Just wanted to acknowledge her work on this. Z2101 is a proposal to change the zoning at the southeast corner of 9th Street and Fairlawn Avenue from O&I 1 office and institutional district to C2 commercial district. Next slide. The proposed zoning change will allow the applicant to build and operate a quick service restaurant with a drive-through service on this half-acre site. Staff is recommending disapproval of the requested zoning change. As you can see on the map, the lands to the immediate north and east of the property are occupied by single-family homes. There is a parking lot and a 2-story office building to the south and a multiple-tenant retail commercial building to the west on the other side of Fairlawn. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. Here are some photographs of the site. The property was rezoned from R1 single family residential to O&I 1 office and institutional in 1998. A single family home was removed from the site and has been vacant since 2003. Next slide. beginning from about 1 block west of Fairlawn, moving from west to east, the zoning transitions from multifamily residential to retail commercial, which is part of a PUD. Then after crossing Fairlawn to office and institutional, ONI 1, and single family residential, R1. The rezoning of the property disrupts this pretty effective transition on the zoning map. On the east side of Fairlawn, parcels to the north and east of the property are zoned R1 single family. The parcels to the south are zoned ONI 1 office and institutional until you get to the south side of 10th Avenue where it transitions again to C2. Next slide. The land use and growth management plan is the land use element of the city's comprehensive plan. The land use and growth management plan does not support the proposed zoning change. According to the future land use map in the land use plan, the property sits on the west edge of a large area designated urban, suburban, low density residential. The land use and growth management plan prefers a nodal development pattern, which clusters C2 and C4 commercial zoning around major road intersections. The proposed zoning would contribute to a strip commercial development pattern, which is discouraged by the plan. Next slide. So other key factors as a basis for the recommendation of disapproval, the intended use, which is a drive-through restaurant, and other uses allowed under C2 zoning threaten the character of the single-family residential neighborhood on the east side of Fairlawn. The other uses allowed under D1 zoning include auto service stations, car washes, and a variety of retail uses. The property is suitable for its current O&I zoning and the development that's allowed under O&I, but it might not be large enough to accommodate the intended development and allow for appropriate setbacks and landscaping. I also want to point out that neighboring owners and residents are opposed. The neighbors expressed a lot of opposition at the neighborhood information meeting, and they have submitted a petition of opposition that's signed by 18 people representing 17 different properties. Next slide. And this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions for staff? Hearing none, is there anyone representing 900 Fairlawn Associates with us this evening to speak to the proposal? Mike, were you expecting someone to be on this evening from the owner's side?
Mr. Chairman, we have not heard from the applicant recently, and I do not see him on the meeting. I believe he is not present.
Thank you, sir. With that, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this item, I'll ask you to raise your hand. We will be timing those and trying to keep comments to 4 minutes. Ms. Mick.
Thank you. I reside at 4617. I'm just 2 doors down on 9th Street where this proposed fast food restaurant would be. I purchased my home along with, my fellow neighbors as a residential neighborhood. I enjoy watching the kids. I don't have kids myself, but the neighborhood has the kids that ride their bikes up and down the street. When he gave the presentation, he said the only way the entrance and exit would be onto 9th Street. So therefore high traffic is going to be up and down our road, which should be just only residential. Also, we're worried about not just the traffic, the noise levels, and the property values decreasing, the crime that it would bring. I've been in touch quite a bit with Melissa. She's been very helpful with answering all my questions and that. He had 2 days to also put up a public sign letting everyone know that this was coming to planning and zoning. As of tonight, it is still not up. And my concern is, you know, I went door to door. I'm the one who went for the petition, went door to door, and I only talked to 22 homes that I could reach in just that one afternoon. And, you know, 18 were willing to sign. Just a couple people didn't want to just really get involved at this moment. But if he can't follow a simple putting up the sign or following regulations, we don't want it. But if he can't even follow those simple rules, what other rules would he not follow if you even approved it? Like I said, I am totally against this for my neighborhood. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's good for our, you know, for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? I don't see any others. Last chance. All right, with that, the public hearing is closed. Discussion, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kaup.
Mr. Chairman, I think there are a number of reasons to deny this rezoning request. The most important one to me is just the number of other permitted uses under the C2 proposed rezoning. So when you're ready for a motion, I'm going to offer a motion to deny, recommend denial.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Mr. Kaup. This is a pretty clear-cut case of a rezoning not meeting the comprehensive plan. It's not part of the commercial node at the intersection. It comes close to it. There's no buffer behind it like there is across the street with the retail strip. It's got multifamily units behind it in that PUD. There's just a number of things. So I'll be following the same line as staff's recommendation.
Anyone else this evening? I also was involved in that stretch of roadway construction years back and do agree with the same comments from the previous commissioners. All right, Mr. Kopp, we would entertain a motion if you have one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd recommend that the recommendation to the Planning Commission would be disapproval of the rezoning application for the reasons set out in the staff report.
Second, Commissioner Warner.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Chris, will you please take the roll?
Okay. Mr. Warner,
Aye.
Ms. Ringler,
Aye.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
Mr. Kaup,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Kanar,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
and Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0 with none abstaining.
Action item D4, CU 20/03 by Kansas Sand and Concrete, Inc. Mr. Hall, should I read through this? Are we prepared to move forward tonight with this item?
We are not. I can just quickly make a few comments, Mr. Chairman. As the memo indicates, we do not have any agreement on the road-related condition. And so staff is recommending that this be continued to the next meeting, which is April 19th.
All right, very well. Thank you, sir. Any questions on that, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kaup.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, what's the, how many times we kick this down the road? Is there any progress actually being made?
Commissioner Kaup, there is some progress or some hint of progress. The applicant, they responded to the previous recommendation by indicating and providing some pretty good background to indicate that some of the road improvements would not be appropriate, would not be feasible without a complete rebuild of scenic court. And staff has generally agreed with that. There is some discussion of maybe having a benefit district, and that's what's under discussion right now. So there has been some discussion, and really at this point, planning staff is relying on the city engineer and the traffic engineer to work with the applicant. I have scheduled a meeting for Friday, I believe it is, and hopefully we will see some progress.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Mike another question.
Yes, sir.
Mike, the creating a benefit district, that just for the Stinta Court piece of this?
Yes.
And we get all the adjoining property owners up and down Stinta Court, all the way down to 25th Street. Is that right?
Yes. Commissioner Kaup, there's really only one other property owner.
Right.
I think the challenge is the way to establish that requirement is to require that the land be replatted. And then that would be a condition that's put on a plat. That can be awkward for various reasons. So I didn't want to get too much into the weeds on that, but I think that's really the question at this point, is how to ensure that Stinta Court can be built in the future without the citizens of Topeka paying for all of it.
What is does the city have a policy on the percentage breakdown on a special assessment for property like this? Do they do 100% on the adjoining properties, benefited properties, or is there city at large contribution?
Bill could probably answer that. Mr. Finder could probably answer that better than I can.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Commissioner Kaup, for benefit districts, I believe state law requires at least 51% or 50%, I'm not sure which one, of the owners in the district approve that. And so that would, that's all we need to then bring that to council for approval. What we have done in the past is have a note on plats that say the surrounding property owners in that district agree not to object to forming a benefit district. So that, I think that is the kind of the note that we're exploring to see if that is something the other property owners would be amenable to.
Well, I think if I might, and we may have had this conversation before in another matter, it's one thing not to object, it's another thing to give consent. I could see this, if this goes forward, it'd be on the condition that the property owner, the applicant, consents to the formation of a benefit district, not that they just don't object. You do have to have that 51% of the property owners.
Yes, I would agree. I think that's what we would try and craft. And I think to answer maybe the other part of your question was the city would not participate policy-wise. We don't participate in a street like this.
So no city at large contribution.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. One last thing, if I might, Mr. Hall or Bill, the 25th Street, is that also something that's being discussed between the city and the applicant?
Commissioner Kalp, I can answer that question. So 25th Street does need to be improved, and that would be improved by the developer. And I believe the developer is amenable to that. It was just, there were some practical, physical difficulties, engineering difficulties with improving Stena Court in the same manner.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners? All right, thanks. Continued to April. We'll move on to item D5, PUD 19/02, Sports Zone PUD by T&J Land Company LLC, requesting to amend the district zoning map from R1 Single Family Dwelling District with an existing conditional use permit for outdoor recreational fields, retail sales, and food service, and existing special use permits for private membership club with golf courses and community building with alcohol sales, all to PUD planned unit development O&I 2 uses with limited I1 uses on a 45-acre property located at 3907, 3909 Southwest Burlingame Road. Continued from May 2020 public hearing, proposed master plan revised to include the ball fields on the west side of the property, deferred from February 2021. We did close the public hearing on this last month. We did have several items at the end of our discussion that we asked staff to come back with recommendations on implementation dates and some clarification on items that we wanted to see worded differently. Mr. Hall will be giving us an update on those items, and then commissioners, we will entertain questions to staff as far as the changes that have been made. Mr. Hall.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Could you go to the next slide, please, Chris? I just wanted to make sure and cover the correspondence that we've all received and that has been sent out to the commissioners, received since the posting of the agenda packet. And I'm not going to read them or anything. There's quite a bit here, but I did want to make sure that the Planning Commission had the opportunity to read them and be aware of them. So the first item is a letter from the Neighboring Property Owners Council, Vernon Jarbo, dated March 5th. And he reiterates a lot of the points of opposition and responds to the discussion at the previous meeting in that letter. The next item is a response to the conditions, the revised recommended conditions from the applicant. This is an email addressed to me by John Ostrowski, one of the owners, dated March 10th. And this is really more than anything responding to the Mr. Jarbo's correspondence. The next item is an email from Matt Massalonis, and this is dated March 10th. And this, I'm not going to try to summarize it or try to characterize it. I just, if you haven't read it, you might want to glance at that. That's dated March 11th. The next item is an email from Julie Palma Ireland, and she is one of the owners along Burlingame, along the frontage road. And she has submitted this email reiterating her opposition and asking some questions. It's more asking questions, and I tried to respond to those questions as best I could. One of the questions was, why didn't staff include the protest petitions in the packet? We did receive 3 protest petitions, and as we explained to them, the protest petitions don't affect how the planning commission votes. The protest petitions are intended for the city council, and they potentially can require a higher level of voting on the council's part. Next item is an email from Mr. Jarbo, again representing the neighboring property owners, and he is responding to the process, disagrees with the process, and is refuting some of the comments made by the applicant in the applicant's response. That was received March 12th. We received also an email today from Mr. Jarbo, and he addresses point by point some of the items in the application and the items discussed at the previous meeting. Do you have any questions about that correspondence? If not, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. We can go through the changed conditions.
But Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Mr. Kaup.
Mr. Hall, all the correspondence that you have run through here since the close of the public hearing, has staff made a determination that these are all properly part of the Planning Commission's record?
Commissioner Kaup, I'm going to let Mary Feeney answer that question. Legal Deputy City Attorney.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, Mary.
Yes, okay. Yes, the public hearing was closed last month, but under Topeka Speaks, people can send in written comments until 5 o'clock today. And so all of the comments that we have received between the public hearings closing in February and 5 p.m. today are all part of the official record.
Thank you. And Mr. Hall, all of those were on the Topeka Speak site. I have seen each of those documents that you referenced, and Chris did email out a couple of those to make sure that we were aware they were added at a later date than the original posted material. So other questions before we go on to some of the changes? All right, Mr. Hall, please continue.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to refamiliarize you with the property, the uses, the PUD. There's Tract A. The current Tract A uses are at the DMV, including the truck driver licensing, dance studio, daycare, white line CDL training. The current Tract B use is the sports zone, is a large building, a recreational facility. Current Tract C use, Tract C is vacant. Current Tract D use, recreational fields, and also the CDL truck examination and training. Next, please. So in the previous meeting, in the previous staff report, there were 11 conditions altogether. And the direction we got at the meeting was to look at, there were certain specific conditions that the Planning Commission asked us to review and directed us to make revisions to. And then we took liberty to look at some of the others and just clarify them. So I'm going to go through these without trying not to read them word for word. There's also a memo in the packet, of course, that explains what each condition was intended to do, or the revisions were intended to do. So first of all, condition 6, that part of the text that's in red is what changed. And really the intent was to just clarify what types of trucks are restricted. The previous condition based it on a gross vehicle weight, which is not appropriate because a lot of these trucks are empty when they enter and leave the site. And so this just makes it more specific. We also really intentionally wanted to provide an exception for school buses since they regularly use the sports zone, as I understand. Next slide, please. Condition number 7, this was revised for greater specificity about the type of fence to be installed and maintained along the north side of the north entrance driveway. And again, just the text in red is what changed. Next slide, please. Condition 8. So this addresses what was a lot of the conversation at the previous meeting about being specific about requiring a landscape buffer. And the previous condition did not specify a definite time. It just said that this requirement would be affected by a change in use. And we've added that it's has to be done within a certain period of time. And as you can see, we're talking about a 30-foot wide landscape strip along the east side of tracks A and B with trees and shrubs, including evergreen and deciduous plants, will provide a screen of 8 feet high at maturity of landscape. And then with the possibility of having a combination of fence and landscape. So one of the criticisms that we've heard is that this isn't detailed enough, that we don't have a detailed landscape plan. What we have learned with experience is that it's difficult sometimes to get the right kind of plants certain times a year. And trying to be that specific within a PUD master plan is it's just a recipe for, it's just not practical. I don't know what I was going to say it's a recipe for, but it's just really not practical. We have a landscape ordinance. We require a landscape plan, and we can review a landscape plan at an administrative level that accomplishes the objectives. And that's just a lot more effective. This is not a specific plan. This is a zoning plan. It's a master plan. And we implement it through site development plans, site plan review, and review of landscape plans. Next slide, please. Okay. So this didn't change a lot. We just added the word maintain as we were asked to do by the commission. We also made it clear that a fence or a barrier would require a fence permit and have to comply with the requirements of the fire department. Fire department has to be able to have access between tracks A and B with a fire truck and other apparatus for fire response. Next slide, please. So this shows exactly what we had changed. And I believe that we did have specific times listed before, but in some cases, it was not considered restrictive enough. And so the direction we got at the meeting was to change the restriction based on the time of year. So this generally follows, it follows spring and summer months and the winter months, generally speaking. So this would require that from March 1st to October 31st, the sign, the EMC sign, the electronic message center, which is part of the sign for sports zone at the entrance, the north entrance, would be allowed only from 7 to 8 p.m., 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then only from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. from November 1st to February 28th. The applicant did respond to this, and they sent us an email request, and this is in the packet, or not the packet, but it's in Topeka Speaks, asking us to revise the condition to allow the EMC to stay on after 5 p.m. in winter months that conform to the brightness and other standards for EMCs.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cobb.
Mr. Hall, I apologize for interrupting you, but we're getting messages flashed up on the screen here. And I think given the fact that this hearing has been closed, it's inappropriate. I don't know if any of those messages remain on the record in any way, but I think it's very inappropriate. And I would ask the chairman to instruct folks not to put whatever the technical term is, the message is flashing up there right now. I do not think it's appropriate for the or that could be sent to the commissioners at this point in time.
Mr. Kaup, I agree. Chris, can you turn off the chat? Is that a function? I know you can on webinar. I don't think you can in this format.
I don't believe that I can.
All right.
I wish I will try. I will keep looking and try.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible, but I agree. Mr. Kaup, thank you for that comment. Mr. Hall, please continue.
Thank you. One thing that I feel necessary to clarify, there's been a lot of comments, a lot of assertions that the existing sign is not legal, not allowed, and that's not really true. As is documented and as was presented earlier, there was a permit issued for the sign, there was a permit issued for the reface. An electronic message center is allowed as part of a sign. If this was applied for today, it would meet the sign code. Except today we require a monument sign. So I just wanted to clarify that. The condition that requires them to shut the sign off at a certain time is above and beyond what the code requires. The standards for EMCs are operational standards. I don't know if it meets all of those standards because they're brightness standards. We've never really looked at it that closely, but I just wanted to clarify the sign is a legal sign based on the information we have. And that's not something, and I mean that sincerely. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is really consistent with the direction we received. We added that signage that state that Topeka traffic regulations will be enforced. The item D, signage at the entrance to the building on track A, informing drivers that class 6 medium duty trucks, except for school buses, and class 7 and 8 heavy duty trucks, is classified by the Federal Highway Administration, restricted from using the north entrance. That was added. That was not specifically requested by the Planning Commission, but it's just another reminder to people using the DMV that if they're driving heavy trucks, they're not supposed to be taking the north entrance. Next, please. So this concludes staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Mr. Hall, I appreciate the clarifications. I think from my recollection and reviewing our discussions last month, this did cover the items that we were considering clarification on, the trucks and implementing the landscaping immediately instead of waiting for change in use, and clarifications on sign and maintenance of fence. I appreciate all the follow-up information. It would have taken us a while to get to that point last month. Commissioners, further questions for Mr. Hall?
Chair, if I might, this is Mr. Kanar. I'm sure this is not going to excite anyone, but in light of the fact that this seems destined for litigation and that we have a new commissioner on, I think it would be beneficial to the process if Mr. Hall could reiterate the analysis of the golden factors with particular attention to the standard that this rezoning is appropriate for the neighborhood.
Commissioner, I'd be happy to do that. If you can give me just a few minutes, please.
By all means.
While Mr. Hall's getting to that information, other questions?
I do have a question.
Commissioner Messina.
Is the applicant in agreement? I think I saw communication that they had issues with the time frame for the light getting turned off at 5 p.m., the sign. Was there any other contention?
It looks like the applicant is still with us. Mr. Holland?
Yes, we are in agreement. We would like the sign to follow City of Topeka standards, but we are in agreement with all the conditions.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kaup.
If I might ask Mary Feeney a question. Mary, one of the communications from Attorney Jarbo was the email of March 12, and he closes his email by saying, I could go through the entire letter from the applicant, but hope that you see fit to exclude their comments as too little and too late. They are at least too late from a legal perspective. Should we interpret that as him saying that all of the post-hearing communications are improper for the Planning Commission to take up? I mean, you submit something for the record and then say what I'm responding to is too late to be part of the record. I'm a little bit confused by that.
Well, I was too, considering that all of the emails and the letters he has sent, we have included in the record for you all to consider. So I didn't understand why he thought that the applicant's response to the conditions should be excluded from the record. I mean, we've included everything for the commissioners to consider and weigh, but I didn't understand where he was coming from.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Kopp. Regardless, I think we just had verbal confirmation of that same concurrence with Mr. Hall's changes and recommendations to the PUD. Mr. Hall, Golden, ready to go, or you still need some time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kanar. I got to say, I'm not sure we've made this clear, but when we originally received an application from the owner, it was not a plan unit development application. It was a straight zoning to I-1 application. And we recognized right away that we didn't feel that I-1 uses as a whole without any restrictions would be appropriate adjacent to residential uses. So we did not proceed with that application. We gave the applicant a choice to either proceed with the application, which we felt we could not support, or to apply for PUD zoning. The applicant agreed to apply for PUD zoning. Keep in mind that the DMV facility was formerly a social club and was sold to the Knights of Columbus by at least one of the owners of property, of the residential property fronting on the frontage road. The building is an office style building. It was remodeled. It's remodeled by the state, and those remodeling permits were approved by the city. What we recognized, what staff recognized as we worked with the applicant, is that I-1 uses would not be appropriate on Tract A directly adjacent to residential uses. And so we asked the applicant if they would agree to limit that part of the property to office and institutional type uses, and they agreed to do that. Tract B, where Sports Zone is located, that building, as you can see, it's an industrial style building, and it's very common for those buildings to not only be used potentially as warehouses and for freight distribution, but also as recreation uses. It's very common that you'll see those types of recreation uses in, say, industrial type areas. But what the applicant wants, or what the owner wants to be able to do, is have the option to sell it to someone who would use it as a light industrial use. And so the PUD and the recommendations made by staff would would require, once that changes use to a light industrial use, it would require certain improvements be made to the property to protect the neighbors. And that includes the cemetery. And so in staff's original recommendation, it was that would occur at a change of use, because that is the more effective way to enforce a zoning requirement is when someone's changing a use and obtaining permits. So what we have here is a series of land uses. Sometimes it's referred to as R1 property. Saying that the property is zoned R1 is misleading. That's the base zoning of the property. A conditional use permit has been approved for the sports zone facility, and a special permit has been approved for the DMV side of the property. So with the conditions of approval that provide some buffering between the sports zone facility and the DMV, buffering from or to or for the residential properties and the cemetery, with those conditions, staff feels that it is a compatible use. And what's also considered, and this is right in the golden factors, is the suitability of property for which it's been restricted. Long term, it might not be suitable for the sports zone, might not be suitable for recreation use. It really depends on the owner's ability to have a tenant that's willing to lease the space for that, to make that viable. So with all things considered, and especially with the restriction on truck traffic using the north entrance, staff feels that the proposed PUD zoning is compatible and reasonable with controls in place that protect the adjacent neighbors. Some of the issues that have been raised are not going to go away unless the zoning is changed. Unless the zoning is changed, there is no restriction on trucks from using the north entrance. Trucks can access property. There's not an inherent restriction on trucks accessing property unless it's a specific condition on a conditional use permit or on a planned unit development. And so some of the problems that have been cited can be resolved through a change in zoning. With the addition of changes to the conditions that require some of the improvements within a fixed time frame rather than waiting on a change of use, that even provides more protection. So the current situation is not great, but a lot of that was created a long time ago, and part of that is the viability of the land or the land to be used for another use, and realistically, it's not well suited to residential use. It's not going to revert to residential use, and so the proposed zoning provides some flexibility for changes of use, which are very likely to happen in the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Questions, commissioners? Hearing no further discussion, I would entertain a motion this evening.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kopp.
Yeah, I did not know we were in a discussion stage here. I do have a comment I'd like to make. As we've had this issue here, multiple hearings, multiple times. It is always unfortunate to have an ongoing dispute between neighbors come before the Planning Commission, but that happens. In this case, the fact that the applicant has not fully complied with some of the city regulations is also unfortunate, but I think as we've talked about before, and at least in my mind, that any violations that might exist are not relevant to the to the discussion today. They don't cut one way or the other in terms of the application. I think the staff has done a good job of taking a difficult situation and designing conditions that on balance present the best option that we have and best reflect the realities of that, the land uses that are there and the land uses that are likely to come about in the future. So when a motion is made, I would support the application.
Well said, Mr. Kopp. I mean, I agree that this does improve the existing condition. We're going to remove trucks from the north entrance. We're adding a landscape buffer immediately or within a reasonable time frame, and yet allow this to be conforming and continue to develop. Further discussion, commissioners? All right, with that, then I would entertain a motion.
Chair, this is Mr. Kanar. I would note that while I think a current situation is somewhat regrettable, not approving this is not going to improve things for the neighbors. And like thank Mr. Hall for his on-the-fly summary there. And having heard all of that, I would move that we move for approval, subject to the conditions as recommended by staff.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion, commissioners? Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Mr. Freed.
Aye.
Ms. Herron.
Abstain.
Mr. Kanar.
Aye.
Mr. Kalp.
Aye.
Ms. Messina.
Abstain.
Ms. Ringler.
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Did you say aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion passes 6-0 with 2 commissioners abstaining.
Item E, communications to the commission. Mr. Finder?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I have
Hall.
a question of Mr. Finder, I think. On the previous item, Kansas Sand and Concrete, I'm wondering if you needed a vote to continue the item to the next meeting.
I don't think that's necessary. If you all agree to,
Okay.
if the consensus is to move it to April, that's a vote's not necessary.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Mr. Finder, communications?
Yes. Only communication, sir, is to welcome a new addition. Commissioner Herron, Demetrius Herron, as you noticed, joined us tonight. I was very impressed meeting her last week for the first time, giving her a little bit of an orientation to what you all do and what she has to look forward to. I just want to again welcome her, introduce her. She is a realtor, I believe, with Keller Williams in town, and will provide some very, very good insight and perspective. And so I just want to welcome her and thank her for her service.
I concur. Welcome, Demetrius. Appreciate your time and service.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kalp.
Before we adjourn, could I ask Mr. Finder a question here or express a concern? I don't know that we're going to have the kind of messaging that we experienced tonight. It may never happen again, but this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and it's the equivalent in my mind to having an in-person hearing and having somebody stand up at the back of the room yelling out questions or comments. And it is not appropriate, and it could create problems for for the city, I think, to allow that practice to continue. So, Bill, if it's possible, using technology to shut that down, I think that'd be the best approach. If that's not possible, I would ask the commission to consider amending the rules that the chair announces at the beginning of each meeting, and saying that, or discouraging folks from doing that activity.
Thanks, Commissioner Kaup. I think we will have a discussion offline and with Mary and see what we need to do to address that situation in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Last call, commissioners. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening.